Gandalf, taking the One Ring for himself and wielding its power involves an in-depth exploration of multiple facets of Middle-earth. The nature of the One Ring, a tool of corruption. The One Ring, forged by Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom, is no ordinary magical artifact. It is a part of Sauron's very essence, containing a significant portion of his power and malice. The ring's purpose is twofold: to dominate the other rings of power, bending their bearers to Sauron's will, and to serve as a conduit for Sauron's influence over Middle-earth. It corrupts those who bear it, amplifying their darkest desires and fears, while slowly consuming their mind and spirit. For Gandalf, a Maya of the Order of the Istari, the ring would represent both a tremendous boon and a dire threat. As a being of significant power, Gandalf would initially resist the ring's influence far better than a mortal would. However, the ring's corruption is insidious, exploiting even the noblest intentions and twisting them into something dark and terrible. The power of the ring is so great that even those who recognize its dangers, such as Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond, refuse to touch it, knowing that even a brief encounter could lead to catastrophic consequences. The ring does not simply offer power, it demands submission to its will, slowly eroding the bearer's sense of self until they are indistinguishable from the darkness that forged it. Gandalf's decision: taking the ring. In a hypothetical scenario where Gandalf chooses to take the ring, we must consider the circumstances that would lead to such a decision. Gandalf is known for his wisdom, foresight, and deep understanding of the forces at play in Middle-earth. For him to take the ring, the situation would have to be dire, perhaps a moment where all hope seems lost, and the only perceived option is to wield the ultimate weapon against Sauron. It may also be a time when the One Ring would sense this brief moment of weakness and decide for itself to take Gandalf as its master, instead of the Dark Lord Sauron, betraying the very being who brought it into existence. Gandalf's choice would likely stem from a desire to protect Middle-earth, to end the threat of Sauron once and for all. However, even in making this choice, Gandalf would be acutely aware of the danger he faces. His initial intention might be to use the ring's power only temporarily, just long enough to defeat Sauron and then destroy it. But the ring is not so easily controlled, and the moment Gandalf puts it on, the process of corruption begins. The Ring of Power has a will of its own, and will not be used for the selfish desires of any one being without its consent. The immediate effects of wearing the ring. Upon donning the ring, Gandalf would experience an overwhelming surge of power. His already formidable abilities would be magnified many times over in layers of intoxicating might. He would possess the power to command the elements, to bend the will of others, and to dominate vast armies with a single thought. His ability to control energy in all its forms and bend it to his will would extract a painful toll on the world around him if he chose. He would sense that which not even he could have perceived before the ring was beset upon his finger. The sensation would be euphoric, the ultimate expression of power that even a Maya like Gandalf had never fully experienced. But this power would come at a great cost. The ring would waste no time corrupting Gandalf's mind and spirit, whispering to him, feeding his ego, and distorting his perception of reality. It would peel back the layers of consciousness of his mind, inserting itself into his memories and ideas. Gandalf might begin with the best of intentions, but the One Ring would slowly twist and malign his thoughts, making him believe that only through his rule could peace and order be maintained in Middle-earth. Gandalf's actions as he wore the One Ring would appear noble at first. He would use its power to defeat Sauron swiftly, crushing the Dark Lord's forces and dismantling the infrastructure of Mordor. The free peoples of Middle-earth would see this as heroic, the fulfillment of Gandalf's long-standing mission to protect the world from darkness and evil. But beneath this facade, the seeds of corruption would already be taking root. Gandalf is slowly succumbing to the will of the ring. In his mind, he would believe that who he is and the power that he wields are for a noble intent, to bring prosperity and order, but in reality, his rule would unleash a divine cunning that seeks only to enslave all of Middle-earth to his will. The defeat of Sauron and the aftermath. Sauron's defeat, while a momentous occasion for all of Middle-earth, would mark the beginning of a new era of darkness. With Sauron's physical form destroyed and his spirit banished, the ring would have no master except for Gandalf. This victory would be celebrated across Middle-earth, but it would be short and hollow. Sauron's fall may bring about a peace that the Free Peoples hoped for, but it would be short and bittersweet. For it would usher in a new and more insidious form of tyranny, a Dark Lord who is more cunning, calculating, and more suspicious of those who would call themselves his friend. The destruction of Sauron's forces would be swift and brutal. The orcs, trolls, and other creatures of darkness, no longer under Sauron's command, would either be annihilated or forced into servitude under Gandalf's rule. The lands of Mordor, once a barren wasteland of ash and fire, might be transformed into a new seat of power for Gandalf, from which he would rule with an iron fist. It may even become a kind of oasis born from the desolate expanse that was once Mordor, a world filled with lush forests and serene tranquility, but it would all be a ruse, for behind it would be a malicious tyrannical evil, born from a benevolent mind that was now twisted to reflect the evil that is the Ring of Power. The immediate aftermath of Sauron's defeat would likely see Gandalf consolidating power across Middle-earth. He would establish himself as the new ruler, taking control of the remnants of Sauron's empire and extending his influence over the lands of men, elves, and dwarves. But while Gandalf's rule might initially appear benevolent, the ring's influence would ensure that his governance became increasingly authoritarian. He would first use his intellect and reason. He would thus the trust that so many had in him to secure their fealty. But in short order, his true intentions would come to light. Those closest to him would see the corruption that has usurped his every thought. He would change, transform into a being that was nothing like the one they knew before, but perhaps even more cunning. They would see the one ring upon his finger and realize that in place of Sauron the Dark Lord, it would be an even more treacherous evil that considers itself as good, despite all that it does being self-serving and evil. Before long, the relief that all in Middle-earth felt with the defeat of Sauron would be replaced with a new and even more all-consuming fear that the one they looked to for hope was now the one who would usher in a new era of darkness. The transformation of Gandalf from wizard to tyrant. The most profound and tragic consequence of Gandalf taking the ring would be his transformation into a dark and powerful tyrant. The ring would not simply amplify Gandalf's power, it would also amplify his fears, insecurities, and desire for control. The compassionate, wise leader that Middle-earth knew would be slowly replaced by a ruler who believed that only through absolute control could order be maintained. Gandalf's mind, once a bastion of wisdom and reason, would become clouded with paranoia and delusions of grandeur. He might see enemies and traitors where none exist, leading him to crack down on dissent with increasing severity. The more power Gandalf wielded, the more he would fear losing it, and this fear would drive him to ever greater extremes. Gandalf's transformation would be gradual but inevitable. At first, his actions might still seem justifiable. Measures taken to ensure stability in a post-Sauron world would seem to make sense. But as the ring's influence deepened, Gandalf's rule would become increasingly oppressive. He would impose his will on the free peoples of Middle-earth, demanding obedience not out of a desire to protect them, but out of a belief that only he could lead them to a better future. It would be a power fraught with the belief that only he could bring and maintain order in a world that has always been at war in one way or another. Even Gandalf's appearance would change and reflect an entity that is suspicious of all those around him, and even more so of those far away. His body would be draped in a mix of dark flowing robes made wispy, almost nebulous by his deep-seated suspicion of the world around him. The impact on Middle-earth's inhabitants. Gandalf's rise to power as the new Dark Lord would have profound consequences for all the peoples of Middle-earth. The Shire, once a peaceful and idyllic land, would become a place of silent oppression, where hobbits are forced to serve Gandalf's will. The simplicity and innocence of hobbit life would be shattered, replaced by fear and subjugation. Although it may appear to be the same Shire before the rise of the Dark Lord Gandalf, it would be a place where suspicion would dominate. The hobbits would look at each other as though a kind of East German Stasi had taken root. The elves, who have always been wary of the rings of power, would see Gandalf's fall as a tragic repetition of history. Many elves, already weary of the world, would choose to leave Middle-earth entirely, sailing into the west to escape Gandalf's tyranny. Those who remained would likely resist Gandalf's rule, leading to bitter conflicts that could spell the end of the great elven realms like Rivendell and LOTR. Men, particularly the kingdoms of Gondor and Rohan, would find themselves in a difficult position. While they might initially support Gandalf, seeing him as the hero who defeated Sauron, they would soon realize the true nature of his rule. Those who resisted would face annihilation, while those who capitulated would become little more than pawns in Gandalf's quest for control. The dwarves, with their strong sense of independence and pride, would likely be among the first to resist Gandalf's rule. The rich mines of Erebor and the halls of Khazad-dûm would become battlegrounds as Gandalf sought to control these resources. The dwarves, though fierce and resilient, would face an uphill battle against the overwhelming power of Gandalf armed with the One Ring. The Ents, ancient and wise, would likely withdraw from the world, retreating into the depths of Fangorn Forest to avoid the reach of Gandalf's dominion. The natural world, which Gandalf once sought to protect, would suffer under his rule as he bends even the forces of nature to his will. The fate of the Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship of the Ring, once united in their mission to destroy the One Ring, would be torn apart by Gandalf's fall. Members of the Fellowship, who once fought side by side, would be forced to confront the terrible reality that their friend and leader had now become their greatest enemy. Frodo, who bore the ring and understood its corrupting influence better than anyone, would be devastated by Gandalf's transformation. He might feel a deep sense of guilt, believing that he had failed in his mission to destroy the ring. Frodo's experiences with the ring would make him acutely aware of the danger Gandalf now posed, potentially driving him to seek out allies to resist Gandalf, even at the cost of his own life. Instead of a life of peace and tranquility, Frodo would embark on a quest to find all those who would heed his warning. He may even confront Gandalf and try to convince him by using the power of their friendship that was once unbreakable. Aragorn, the rightful king of Gondor, would be faced with an impossible choice. As a leader of men, he would be compelled to resist Gandalf's tyranny. But this would mean opposing the very person who had guided and supported him throughout his journey. The battle between Aragorn and Gandalf would not just be physical, but also ideological, representing the struggle between true leadership and corrupted power. Aragorn's importance to all in Middle-earth would be magnified, as they would look to him to be the one to stand against the power of Gandalf. Legolas and Gimli, representing the elves and dwarves, would also be forced to choose sides. Their loyalty to Gandalf as a friend and mentor would be tested against their duty to their people. Legolas might seek to rally the elves to resist Gandalf, while Gimli, with his deep-seated pride in dwarven independence, might lead his kin in a rebellion against Gandalf's rule. Sam, ever loyal to Frodo, would stand by his friend, becoming a key figure in the resistance against Gandalf. His unyielding sense of loyalty and love for the Shire would drive him to oppose Gandalf, even when all hope seemed lost. Merry and Pippin, the young hobbits who had grown into heroes, would likely join Sam and Frodo in the resistance, using their courage and cleverness to undermine Gandalf's rule in any way they could. But all would be weary and tired from the idea of having to go to war against a new Dark Lord, a powerful entity whom they once trusted unequivocally as a friend and mentor. The very idea of fighting Gandalf would be emotionally defeating, as the One Ring resided on his finger. The role of the Valar and divine intervention. In Tolkien's world, the Valar are powerful beings who govern the universe. They often work behind the scenes to guide the course of events in Middle-earth. Gandalf's fall would likely prompt a response from the Valar, who might see his corruption as a deviation from the intended course of history. The Valar might choose to intervene directly, sending another emissary to confront Gandalf and restore balance to Middle-earth. This new emissary could be another Maya, perhaps one who had remained hidden until this moment of crisis. The confrontation between Gandalf and this new emissary would be a battle not just of physical power, but of wills, as the new emissary sought to break the hold the ring had on Gandalf. Alternatively, the Valar might work through the free peoples of Middle-earth, guiding them in subtle ways to resist Gandalf's rule. This would align with the Valar's traditional approach of empowering the inhabitants of Middle-earth to take control of their own destinies. In this scenario, the defeat of Gandalf would be a collective effort, requiring the courage and wisdom of many individuals working together, just as it was when they fought and defeated Sauron. The question would be asked if this is nothing but an endless circle where a new Dark Lord is put in place by the Ring of Power to replace the previous one. The problem may be in how the circle can be broken forever and the power of the ring ended forever. Divine intervention, while possible, is not guaranteed in Tolkien's world. The Valar, though powerful, are not omnipotent, and they often prefer to let the inhabitants of Middle-earth shape their own fate. This reluctance to intervene directly might leave Middle-earth to suffer under Gandalf's rule for many years before any divine action is taken. In any event, it would result in another war that would most likely consume all of Middle-earth and its people. The long-term impact on Middle-earth. The long-term impact of Gandalf's rule would depend on how his story ultimately plays out. If Gandalf were to be defeated, Middle-earth would be left in a state of recovery, with many lands and peoples needing to rebuild after years of oppression. The scars of his rule would run deep, with trust in all those who call themselves wise severely damaged. The inhabitants of Middle-earth might become more wary of those who claim to have their best interests at heart, leading to a more fractured and distrustful world. If Gandalf's rule were to endure, Middle-earth would be transformed into a land of totalitarian control. The beauty and diversity of the world would diminish, replaced by a more sterile and controlled environment where individuality is sacrificed for the sake of order. The free peoples would be forced to live under constant surveillance, with any dissent crushed by Gandalf's overwhelming power. But it would be vastly different than that of a world controlled by Sauron, where Middle-earth feared the crushing rule of a Dark Lord who lacked any compassion and tolerance, eviscerating all resistance wherever it dared reveal itself. The Dark Lord Gandalf would be just as corrupted by the Ring of Power, but maybe more tactful in how he dealt with anyone or anything that opposed his dominance. Just like a cat plays with its food, he would deceive those who would rise against him, allowing them the brief feeling of hope before his iron fist would crush and destroy them in a manner for all to see in plain sight. The cultural and societal impact of Gandalf's rule would be profound. The elves, who have always been protectors of nature and beauty, might withdraw entirely from Middle-earth, leaving the world to the rule of men. The dwarves, known for their craftsmanship and independence, might become little more than slaves to Gandalf's will, forced to produce weapons and machinery for his armies. The men of Middle-earth, particularly the kingdoms of Gondor and Rohan, would likely be divided. Some might submit to Gandalf's rule, believing that his power is the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. Others, however, would resist, leading to a series of brutal conflicts and wars that would tear the world apart, creating an even more divided place than it was when Sauron was the main threat. The corruption of Middle-earth's spirit. One of the most tragic consequences of Gandalf taking the ring would be the corruption of Middle-earth's very spirit. The world that once stood as a beacon of hope, beauty, and resilience would become a land of darkness and fear. The natural world, which Gandalf once sought to protect, would be bent to his will. The magical creatures of Middle-earth, such as the Ents, the Eagles, and the Elves, would either be subjugated or driven to extinction. The rich mythology and lore of the world would be replaced by a culture of conformity and obedience, with any deviation from Gandalf's vision of order stamped out. The moral and ethical fabric of Middle-earth would be irrevocably damaged. The very idea of good and evil would become blurred, with Gandalf's rule representing a twisted form of justice where the ends justify the means. The free peoples, once united in their fight against Sauron, would be divided, with brother turning against brother in a world where trust and loyalty are in short supply. The resistance, a glimmer of hope. The resistance against Gandalf would be a small but determined group of individuals who refuse to submit to his tyranny. This group might include members of the Fellowship, as well as new allies who rise up to fight against the new Dark Lord. The resistance would face overwhelming odds. Gandalf's power, amplified by the ring, would make him nearly invincible. However, the resistance would have one advantage: their knowledge of Gandalf's true nature. They would understand that beneath the Tyrant lies the Gandalf they once knew, and they might seek to exploit this knowledge in their fight against him. Frodo, who has the deepest understanding of the ring's power, would have to play a central role in this confrontation. His experiences with the ring would give him unique insight into Gandalf's state of mind, and he might be the one to reach out to Gandalf, appealing to the part of him that still remembers the mission he was sent to fulfill, to remember the fellowship of the ring that he himself had a hand in forging. The battle would likely take place in a location of great significance, perhaps the very spot where Gandalf first took the ring. The forces of the resistance, though outnumbered and outmatched, would fight with determination and courage, knowing that the fate of Middle-earth rests on their shoulders. If the resistance succeeds in separating Gandalf from the ring, they might be able to destroy it, ending its influence once and for all. However, this would likely come at a great cost, possibly including the loss of Gandalf himself, who might choose to sacrifice his own life to ensure the ring's destruction. If the resistance fails, Middle-earth would be plunged into a new era of darkness, with Gandalf's rule cemented for centuries to come. The world would become a place of fear and oppression, with any hope of freedom extinguished. It may even be that at this time, even greater powers are summoned to continue the saga and free the people of Middle-earth from subjugation and tyranny. Gandalf, under the influence of the ring, might come to believe that the ends justify the means, that his actions, no matter how cruel or oppressive, are justified if they lead to a greater good. This belief would stand in stark contrast to the moral absolutism that Gandalf once upheld, where certain actions are considered inherently wrong, regardless of their outcomes. The legacy of Gandalf's fall. The legacy of Gandalf's fall would be a cautionary tale for future generations. It would serve as a reminder of the dangers of power and the importance of humility and self-restraint. Gandalf's story would become a legend, told and retold throughout the ages, as a symbol of both the potential for greatness and the capacity for downfall that exists within all beings. Middle-earth would be forever changed by Gandalf's actions. Whether he is ultimately defeated, redeemed, or remains in power, the world would be left with a deep awareness of the complexities of good and evil, and the thin line that separates them. The story of Gandalf and the One Ring would be a lasting testament to the idea that even the most noble intentions can be corrupted by the pursuit of power, and that true wisdom lies in recognizing the limits of one's own strength. In the end, Gandalf's fall would be a tragedy of epic proportions, a story of a hero who became the very thing he sought to destroy. It would challenge our understanding of heroism and villainy, and force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that even the greatest among us are not immune to the darkness that lies within.